1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader. They're really good at numbers. Auto Trader.
You remember John Tunstall? Remember the stories he tell us about the play in Fantan? Someone runs up to him and says, "Hey, the world is coming to an end." And the first one says, "Well, I best go to the mission and pray." And the second one says, "Well, hell, I'm gonna go buy me a case of mezcal and 6 whores." And the third one says, "Well, I shall finish the game. I shall finish the game, Doc."
And hello, welcome to Unequal Sequel. I am Dave, and I'm one of the two hosts of this stupendous podcast.
And I'm Rich, and I'm the other host of this stupendous podcast. Think of me as Hardy to Dave's Laurel, because we both look great in bowler hats. We do.
You know what? I really do. I'm a hat person. The premise of Unequal Sequel is very simple. We ask our guests their best ever sequel, their worst ever sequel, and finally their dream sequel.
And we often drift off course and talk about other things as well, not just sequels, other movies, sometimes TV, sometimes just life. It's nice. It's a little rambly chat.
It's lovely. We should also point out we do spoilers. So if we mention a film that you have not seen, you know, go get your juicer, blend up some fruit, come back, and then carry on listening, okay?
Nice.
On today's episode, we are joined by Michael Marden.
Michael is a podcast producer extraordinaire. You may recognise him from the Quickly Kevin 90s football podcast with Josh Widdecombe and others. Brilliant. And possibly the biggest podcast in the country right now, Parenting Hell, with Josh Widdecombe and Rob Beckett. He's the producer of that.
So we're very excited to sit down with Michael and chat all things sequels with him.
These are Michael Marden's Unequal Sequels. Enjoy.
Well, the first question is quite an easy. It's to get your brain working. And this might be quite good because I just listened to an episode of Quickly Kevin, and you said you have a scrapbook of all your first time you went to the cinema and stuff.
Yes.
Do you remember the first sequel you got excited about?
It would be quite late, I think, in terms of getting excited about a sequel. I mean, the first one that springs to mind, which is very late, is probably Jurassic Park 2.
Brilliant.
I mean, I saw sequels at the cinema earlier than that, and certainly saw sequels on VHS earlier than that. But I think Jurassic Park, so I would have been 13 when that came out. That's probably the first film that was going to be released in the cinema when I had kind of come of age, if you like, as a film lover, as a young budding kind of cineast. I mean, obviously, I was incredibly disappointed when I left the cinema having watched that. I mean, I don't think I've probably watched it since the cinema, but I remember thinking I can't even pretend that I liked that. Everything that I loved about the first Jurassic Park, which is tight and lean and exciting, and it's filled with not just the brilliant set pieces that Spielberg is so good at, but all the characterization, the humor, all of that's there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's fantastic set pieces in 2 because, you know, Spielberg knows how to direct action. You don't lose that. But it felt like everything else was missing and everything else was lacking.
Yeah, it definitely was. So did you buy into the build-up? Were you proper excited beforehand? Did you pre-book your tickets? Did you buy like the jumper? Because their marketing went crazy for the second one.
Yeah, I didn't have as much of the merch, but I was definitely I'd say 93 to 97, 98 before I went to film school. Film was my personality. I hadn't developed one yet. So it was that kind of badge of pride. I am the things I like, and movies are the things that I like the most, and here are the films that I love. This is who I am. So yeah, I was consuming every magazine. You know, I was of an age where I could just about get away with going to, not Blockbuster, but the kind of smaller regional video shops on the Isle of Wight, convincing them that I was 18, even though I was only 15 or 16. So I could rent out all of these films that I'd read about in Neon and Empire and places like that. And then watching, you know, Taxi Driver for the first time, Mean Streets for the first time, late at night in my loft room. Yeah. So yeah, I was fully injected into my veins, kind of, yeah. It was like crack.
Yeah, we quite often talk about on this podcast people's cinematic awakenings. And mine was about 99.
Great year.
Which one was yours, would you say? Not to make you feel old.
My cinematic awakening.
You're still going through it?
Yeah, still doing it now, mate. You know me. I still haven't seen The Godfather Part 3 yet. I guess probably I was about 8 or 9, and my gran took me to the cinema to watch The Third Man. And I thought, oh, it's a black and white film. It's going to be boring. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I think that was probably the time that I was like, this is really cool. I really like this. But yeah, I get the kind of Jurassic Park 2 thing, because Jurassic Park at the cinema was incredible. And there was no way that Jurassic Park 2 was ever going to be as good as Jurassic Park.
I was so excited for it, though. I was absolutely buzzing for Jurassic Park 2. Spielberg was still in charge of it. I mean, Jeff Goldblum was back. Raptor was still at that point, gave me nightmares. And then, it was, well, let's be frank, it's pretty rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's very underwhelming. I'm trying to think what the first sequel I would have seen. I have a feeling it was Home Alone 2 might have been the first sequel I ever saw at the cinema. I was probably equally as excited about that, but I would have only been, I was going to say 12 years old. And it's not a film that I have a lot of affection for, apart from the fact that it's set in New York. And, it's one of those ones where you watch it now at Christmas and you're like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah.
But it's very much through the kind of rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. Were you to watch that objectively for the first time, you'd be like, that's just not very good.
Ouch.
Oh, I could feel Dave grimacing from here. He loves Home Alone 2.
Oh, is he a big fan?
I love Home Alone 2, but probably for the reasons you just said. I'm pretty sure it's one of my first sequels that I saw as well, and I absolutely love it. It still makes me laugh when Harry gets hit by bricks. Still wet myself. Is there a scene in Jurassic Park 2 that you like you can hold on to?
I remember, that's the one with the cracked windscreen, isn't it? Where the truck is hanging over the cliff.
That's pretty good.
Again, Spielberg knows how to direct an action sequence and a set piece. That's my one abiding memory, and the fact that it's Vince Vaughn, isn't it? Who's steps in, yeah. And I remember thinking, oh, I liked him in Swingers. I really don't like him in this.
How do you feel about the rest of the Jurassic Park series, the Jurassic World franchise, and where it's going? I didn't mind the first reboot in the same way that I didn't mind the first Star Trek reboot, the first Star Wars, because I felt like that all of them and that Jurassic Park one probably just about got the balance right in terms of kind of fan servicing and creating a new world. I hated the next one. I thought it was awful. It was the theme park version of a movie that you dread all of these big Hollywood films will be. And I'll still watch the next one, but I've got zero interest in it at all. With the legacy characters, when they're bringing it full circle and they're all coming back. It just feels grubby. It just feels like, guys, I'm going to give you my money anyway. Don't also ruin it for everyone else. My biggest issue is sequels, and we'll come to this with some of my other choices, is that I don't mind if a sequel is shit, because more often than not they are, especially when it's not the same creative crew, writers, directors, everyone sort of goes away and does different things. The thing I can't stand is when a sequel diminishes the original. Yeah. And the quickest way to do that is to fucking get people who loved making the original phoning it in. Yeah. Jeff Goldblum will look dead behind the eyes in anything he does to do with Jurassic Park, that it sort of breaks my heart, because there's so much energy and there's so much fun and mischief in his performance in Jurassic Park. Every time I see him do a version of that, it's like watching a boxer who's punch drunk have won too many fights. I'm like, dude, you're doing your career brain damage. Like, just walk away, man. I feel that's what he's like in real life now, though. He's just a parody of himself. I think he's buying into the concept of Jeff Goldblum, his jazz playing maniac. But he looks like he's having fun as Jeff Goldblum. I don't think he will look like he's having fun in however many Jurassic Park. I mean, hopefully they'll just kill him off. Oh, really?
I think this will be the last one, won't it? Just you saying that just made me think of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, talking of dead behind the eyes, characters coming back and hating it.
I mean, let's not even open that fucking fridge.
So it's today's Tuesday. What is your best sequel today? Because, it's a hard choice to make.
Well, this is quite a controversial choice, I think.
Yes, it is.
And slight caveat or caveats is that obviously this isn't the best sequel of all time. It's probably The Godfather Part 2 or The Empire Strikes Back. Honourable mentions to Terminator 2, Aliens, Toy Story 3, Silence of the Lambs, technically a sequel, also a masterpiece.
I'll allow it.
But what I figured was that a lot of people are either going to have already talked about some of these films or certainly will the more episodes you do.
You'd be surprised.
Well, have people not covered those already?
Nobody has mentioned The Godfather Part 2 yet.
Or no one's picked
No.
Empire Strikes Back yet either, as their best.
Oh my god! Literally my favourite too. And I just thought I haven't got time to listen to every single episode. I don't want to reach it. Well, okay. Now I'm sat here telling your listeners that the best sequel is Young Guns 2, and I feel like a complete idiot. Obviously, it's The Godfather Part 2, guys. Obviously, and Empire Strikes Back. However, for this,
But to you,
but to me,
Yeah.
there was a period when I was younger. No, so this is sort of pre-peak 93 to 99. This is when I was still kind of hiring VHSs from the local store, pre-Blockbuster on the Isle of Wight, because we were sort of late to adopt. So these were still the local kind of mum and pop video stores where you'd go in and you'd basically be faced with the choice of some Steven Seagal actioner like Nico or Hard to Kill or like License to Blow, whatever nonsense it was called. For a little while, there was sort of Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah. Yeah, that's the X-rated one. But then I remember hiring Young Guns 2 out with my mate and watching it, and it genuinely blew my mind because I had never seen a Western before, or certainly not from memory, like perhaps some kind of old like John Wayne, John Ford Westerns around my nan and granddad's as a kid, but they didn't resonate with me because, you know, you're 7, 8, 9 years old. Who gives a crap about some old John Ford Western? But this, it was just fun. It felt tonally unlike anything I'd ever seen. The action was good for a 12-year-old. I'm not saying that now as a 41-year-old, but it was kind of witty. It was violent. It had a real kind of propulsion and momentum to it. And there was a period for about 2 years where me and my best friend at the time, it was our favourite film. We would just watch it endlessly. We would quote it endlessly. But the main reason I've picked it is because it was a kind of gateway film for me in that I now love Westerns. Like Westerns are probably my favourite genre. Once Upon a Time in the West, The Wild Bunch, Pat Graham, Billy the Kid, Unforgiven. Like I absolutely love Westerns. And this film was probably the catalyst of that passion. It was the one that made me go away. And I didn't find those films until a few years later. You know, I would go and then watch sort of Tombstone, the first Young Guns, all the Westerns that followed. I love Tombstone. I could talk all day about Val Kilmer's performance in Tombstone. He's just in a different movie altogether. But this is a film that I think genuinely changed the sort of trajectory of my taste in films. So for me, it's kind of like, again, the best, used loosely, the best sequel for me, because it's probably the sequel that's had the most influence on my film tastes subsequently.
I like to think that you went to film school because of Young Guns 2.
Well, that and Goodfellas probably were the two lightning rods.
That's cool.
Yeah. When I watched Goodfellas for the first time, it genuinely was like, oh, right, this is cinema. I remember thinking, why is that so much better than anything else I've ever seen? And then sort of getting a Halliwell's film guide and poring over, who is this Scorsese guy? And like, what else has he done? But anyway, Goodfellas doesn't have a sequel.
Thank God.
Yeah, Young Guns 2 was a real fork in the road. I mean, had either of you guys seen it before I recommended it?
No.
Yeah, I had. A little bit like you. I wasn't really into Westerns as a kid, but my dad has always really liked Westerns. And so Young Guns and Young Guns 2 kind of become a movie we could all watch together, because my dad would like it and I'd like it. And then that sort of set us off then to watching things like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and then moving on to things like Dirty Harry and stuff that movies that my dad really liked. So yeah, it's got a little bit of a special place in my heart as well, Young Guns. But you'd not seen it before, Dave.
No, this is the first time.
What was your take? Was that fresh eyes, Dave? Like from the moment the score kicks in, after you sort of meet the old man, Brushy Bill Roberts, who's allegedly Billy the Kid, there's this sort of lovely moment where he's being interviewed by Brad Whitford, who then becomes Bradley Whitford of the West Wing fame and Get Out and stuff.
Yeah,
It's quite fun watching this film, seeing all of the faces who didn't have a career when this film came out. But suddenly you're like, oh, right, it's him. Oh, yeah, God, it's him. But the moment where he sort of sets up that little, the bookend of the film, and he goes, I think the line is like, you got any scars? And it pushes in on an aged Emilio Estevez's face. And his sort of like sparkly blue eyes are remembering the past. And there's this cut of a sort of over the head shot looking over a canyon, and Silvestri's score kicks in. I just had goosebumps remembering the music from that film.
Is it because you're a big John Bon Jovi fan?
mean, I think this soundtrack's good. I'm not going to die on the John Bon Jovi hill, that's for sure.
Blaze of Glory is a fucking good track, by the way.
It is a good tune. Yeah.
Academy Award nominated Blaze of Glory.
Was it?
Yeah, it's an absolute banger. John Bon Jovi could be an Academy Award winner.
Wow.
But I can't separate the memory of loving that shot and that sequence and then this film as a kid from watching it now. Like literally, I finished watching it about an hour before this record. So I was really interested to know if one of you hadn't watched it and what your sort of objective modern take on it was.
Well, allow me. First question, just a quick question. Did I have to see Young Guns 1 before this to really like the characters? Do you think that would benefit me if I did?
I think it would have probably helped a bit with their relationships and the characterization. I think there's an argument that maybe Billy the Kid comes across as a bit more of a prick if you only watching this film.
Absolutely.
Just gets all his mates killed because he's an idiot.
I found him very selfish.
Yes.
It's a hard one because I could see why you like it if you watched it when you're little, because it's like a Diet Coke of a Western film, because it's kind of fun. It's got this Bon Jovi riff that keeps sounding like it's going to go into Time After Time for some reason to me.
I had written exactly that. It was like Duran Duran and Cyndi Lauper had done a duet, and I mean that in a good way.
It's bizarre, isn't it? And I really enjoyed, like you said, the faces pop up. Viggo Mortensen's, because I'm a massive Lord of the Rings geek, that I thought, I was like, oh my God, it's Viggo. And then the Robert Nepo, who was the guy who got shot. Well, a lot of people get shot, but the sheriff who he pushes out of the saloon is Teabag from Prison Break.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like, I know this face and that voice.
Well, he, the director of this, did a lot of second unit work on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Jeff Murphy.
There you go.
It plugs into your world.
Well, now I'm interested, Michael. Let's talk about it more. No, I did enjoy it. It was fun. It kept in my head. I keep thinking, was this the same era as Three Musketeers? As in that era of what do they call themselves? It wasn't the frat pack, was it?
The Brat Pack.
That was, sorry, not the frat pack. With the young Christian Slater, who was a lot of fun. Always enjoyed him. Kiefer Sutherland at this point was, I think, would have been absolutely massive, wouldn't he? Yeah, I think this is probably around, I think it's pre kind of Flatliners. They were all on sort of various roads of ascendancy. I mean, the first film had obviously Charlie Sheen in it. You haven't seen it, but Charlie Sheen was in it as well. He gets killed. I was expecting Charlie Sheen to be in this one because that's what I think when I think Young Guns. I think the brothers. Well, obviously, he must have died in the first one. Spoiler. He's the big kind of casualty at the end of the first Young Guns. I didn't like him. I did not like Billy the Kid. I was kind of like, come on, someone shoot the fucker. How is this guy keep surviving all these like shenanigans? And he keeps going, and all his mates, and he doesn't really care when they seem to die. He just keeps going on. I didn't really warm to, but I can see how you loved it. I mean, it's definitely that era. I feel like I was missing a trick when not watching Young Guns 1. And it's one of those films I'm pretty sure I went, oh yeah, I've seen Young Guns and Young Guns 2. I hadn't. Definitely not. Never seen it. So... sorry. No, I mean, it's not a film I would defend. Like I said, I really wish I'd picked The Godfather Part 2. But also, I feel like this early in the choices, you've really set me up as someone who doesn't know what he's doing by me having to pick Young Guns 2 first.
I like it. I like it. I think it's a great choice. The whole point of this podcast is you pick choices that mean something to you. You don't have to be objectively the best one in the best film in the world. You know, we've had some really weird choices. Mm-hmm. And Young Guns 2 is a great shout. How many times did you watch it in that first rent? That's always the first market. Two or three, but it would often be I had my best friend at the time. It was one of those ones where his dad would rent edgier movies, your Commandos, your RoboCops, your Beverly Hills Cops, stuff like that, and then he would be at work and we would sneak round the next day, usually, during school holidays or half term, and see what he had that we weren't supposed to be watching. But this was one of the ones where we had gone and actually picked it, because I remember vividly, I don't know if you had this sort of in video shops in the 80s and 90s where it wasn't like Blockbuster where they had these huge kind of outlet mall size ones where you had the videos in their full cases. In the smaller shops, which were almost kind of like corner shops, they had decanted all of the paper sleeves of the VHSs and folded them into these like really thin kind of like flip file ones where you had to kind of like flip through like it was vinyl. So you'd get like sort of 50 films in a row, but you could only see the front of whichever one you had flipped forward. And I remember flipping through and being really taken by these sort of like young stars pointing their guns down the screen. It just felt so kind of fresh and exciting.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, how exciting it was when going to a video store and how certain films they only had like certain amount of copies of. So if you didn't get there early enough in the evening, there was no chance. And you'll have to rely on your like third or fourth choice. So when you get back to your house, you're like, did you get it? You're like, no. Did you get the second choice? No.
No.
Yeah.
I got Young Guns too.
You like Westerns, right?
Yeah. Back then it was we were allowed to rent like one film a week. So the stakes, the pressure on that film being good was so high that when you got a dud, I'm pretty sure there were times as a preteen where I had cried because my film choice was so bad and I was so disappointed. But then conversely, there were times when I remember I saw True Romance for the first time by accident because basically I wanted to watch Reservoir Dogs. I'd heard about Reservoir Dogs and they just didn't have it because it wasn't out in the UK yet. It's still sort of been banned or hadn't been released. And the guy behind the counter was like, look, I know you're not old enough, but he wrote this. You should give it a go. And I was just like, True Romance. What is it? A love story? Ugh. Rented it and obviously absolutely blew my mind. So that was the kind of the other flip side of that lottery of not having everything you wanted at your disposal.
I did something very similar with Pulp Fiction. Coming out of the video shop as a 13, 14-year-old with Pulp Fiction and getting home watching it going, this is not for me. This is for grown-ups.
Would you watch a Young Guns 3 if they did it?
Oh, 100%. If they found a way to reboot it, I'd be there. I'd be front and centre at the IMAX.
I read about the accident that they nearly killed what's-his-face in this film. What was it?
Lou Diamond Phillips.
Yeah, when he had a horse run away and he had the rope around his neck and nearly died.
Yes. Yeah. And I think they engineered, there's a scene in it where Christian Slater stabs him with a knife in the arm. And actually they wrote that in to cover the cast that he then had to carry on his arm for the rest of the shooting.
Oh.
Yeah. You have to appreciate that. Most, like nowadays, mostly be CGI riding horses. But in Young Guns 2, it seems to be all actual riding horses. And when they jumped down the hill, I couldn't work out how they got the horses to actually roll down the hills. It looked like it was a bit iffy.
Probably just shoved some horses down a hill, Dave.
Just got the owners and go, you guys just take a walk. You don't want to be here for this.
They would have done that bit in like in Terminator 2 with the helicopter. They went, yeah, if you just want to go get a coffee, I'm just going to fly this helicopter under a bridge. And yeah, they're probably the same thing. It was like, yeah, just turn your back and I'm just going to shove this horse down a hill.
Multiple horses down a hill.
Yeah. I was really surprised that when I watched it back again, I was like, I really recognise Pat Garrett. Where do I recognise him from? And he's the guy from CSI. It's William Peterson, who's like the main guy in CSI.
Yeah, well, he's in Manhunter, the Michael Mann original Hannibal Lecter movie. He plays the detective in that as well.
Yeah, and it's got Alan Ruck in this as well, who's in Succession.
Yes.
He's the older brother in Succession. There's a few faces and you just think, oh, I know that person from somewhere.
James Colburn's in it as well. I thought that was good casting.
Well, that's a lovely little cameo, but it's one of those appearances where you go, oh, that's acting. Oh, right. That's someone who can actually act against against a Brat Pack. It reminded me of that scene in
Wayne's World 2.
Yes, Wayne's World 2 with Charlton Heston. Yes, yeah. And Charlton Heston turns up. It was very much like, no, come on, guys. And then he gives a performance. You're like, oh, right, yeah, okay, yeah, I remember now. That's good acting.
That's exactly what I thought as well. Wayne's World 2 is exactly where my brain went to.
What is your most disappointing sequel? So you went in with really high hopes and then you came out disappointed. Not your worst sequel, but disappointing.
I mean, I don't want to double down on The Matrix, but I'm not sure I felt as big a dip in expectation versus reality.
As in Reloaded? Should we start with Reloaded?
Yeah, let's start with Reloaded, and we won't talk about it for too long because I've got a lot to say about the other one. Although essentially they are one film that's been chopped in half, which is a big part of a lot of the problems with the third act film that is Revolutions. Yeah, I'd say that's the one that I probably went in
really high.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the first Matrix. I'd say that 18 months prior to that, everything had been about Star Wars. It was all about the Phantom Menace. I'm a big Star Wars fan, or a big fan of the original trilogy. I'd waited my whole life to sort of see a dream sequel or prequel. And then from nowhere, this little sort of sci-fi film from the guys who made Bound just crept up and changed the game. And because that film is so kind of brilliantly ambiguous, like the ending and what it's about, is sort of so much of it is left open to your interpretation. I think it's really effective as a result. And then the second one comes along, rather than being a question or posing a question about what it is to be, human, and are we all of those things, all of that sort of like fairly entry level philosophical debate. This film answers that, and the next one beyond that answers it, but it's not an answer that you want, because it completely undermines everything that you thought the first film was about. And I think it makes you look stupid for loving the first film as much. So I'd say that second Matrix was probably or equally the most disappointed.
Yeah.
But I'd say the expectations were higher for that one, because Revolutions, at least I'd been punched in the gut by Reloaded. So I kind of knew a second hit was coming. I was just hoping that maybe I was wrong.
I dragged a lot of people to go see Reloaded because I was like, it's the sequel to The Matrix. The Matrix, guys. It's going to be brilliant. We went to a midnight screening. I was like, it's going to be well worth it. You're going to absolutely love it. And then they did not love it. And everyone got really angry for me when it was like 3:00 in the morning. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I thought it was going to be much better than that.
I mean, the other one that does come to mind, but I think we have to exclude it, and I think you guys have touched on it, is Anchorman 2. But I think comedy is so difficult to do as a sequel. And I think some of the reasons why comedy is difficult also feed into my issue with the Matrix sequels, is that the moment something becomes self-aware, it's impossible to recreate what made the original so good, because you're not running on instinct anymore. You're not thinking, I trust my judgment that this is good. I don't know if it's good. The moment you've got an audience response and reaction that tells you what worked, because it's become part of the kind of cultural lexicon, people are quoting it back at you. And comedy is such a fragile thing that when they made that film, they had no idea that milk was a bad choice, or, I'm trapped in a glass cage of emotion. All of those things were going to resonate and be funny outside of their editing room.
Yeah.
That every single line in Anchorman 2 might as well be delivered with a wink down the camera. And it did feel like the Matrix sequels were a little bit of that. It's like, oh, we know people like this. Let's do that. But let's do it to fucking oblivion. Let's turn it all the way to 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like once the genie's out the bottle, then you don't have the surprise factor anymore. So you can't do the same thing and expect the same reaction with a sequel. It has to be different, or it has to be bigger. It can't be the same rehashing. And you're right, comedy, it absolutely never works with comedy. And I think with something like The Matrix, the whole ethos of loving The Matrix is because it's something completely different, and you can't be different again. You can't do the same thing and have that same reaction because it's not different. You've already done it. It's already there. But also, I think they did try and do something different. It was just the choice they made was bad.
Yeah.
It's just, well, everyone liked Bullet Time. We're just not going to do that again.
Scrap that.
Get rid of that. All the things people like, we'll just dump, and we'll keep all this real, mystical shit that nobody really understood. That's what we'll build our franchise around, shall we?
It was the perfect example of The Emperor's New Clothes. You're sort of looking around going, am I going to have to be the one that calls this out and goes, this is shit. I'm sorry, guys, this is shit.
Well, that's exactly what I had to do, Michael. At 3:00 in the morning, driving everyone home, dropping them off like that out of the car. Sorry again. But yeah, let's move on to the worst, because I think this is going to go quite smoothly into it. What is your worst ever sequel?
Well, I think for me, it's The Matrix Revolutions. I think there are worse films that are sequels than The Matrix Revolutions. That's a given. I have a particular bugbear with Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D, whatever it's being called these days.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Partly because it's awful, but also because there's a sort of sequence or extended sequences where I think it's SeaWorld or a version of SeaWorld in the sort of tunnel, and they're trapped underwater as the shark attacks. But I, for most of my sort of child and then adult life, thought that's what SeaWorld, but in particular the Sea Life Centre in Portsmouth, was like, in that when you went and visited, you just went under the sea in this tunnel, and there would be fucking sharks and rays and dolphins and everything. So much so that I didn't want to go there because I'd seen Jaws and I was scared. Eventually, I was old enough to go, and I went with my niece. Took her there thinking, this is going to be brilliant. We're going to go completely under the water in the ocean. Not thinking logically as a grown man that
How old were you at this point? Sorry,
I would have been early 30s.
Okay, so you should have known better. Okay, just wanted to.
I absolutely should have known better. It's the equivalent of one of your parents telling you a fact as a kid that's clearly a joke, but because your brain is still forming, you just go, oh right, yeah, that's what that, and then 20 years later or university, you say a thing casually in the pub and everyone turns to you and goes, sorry, what?
What?
And then you explain. And then in the explanation, you realise, oh, yeah, sorry, my dad was pranking me when I was 5 years old and I've just carried that with me like my entire life. This was a sort of real world physical version of that, where I took my niece in and I had hyped it up so much. I was like, it's going to be like sharks swimming past us and everything. And we walked in and it was just essentially a hallway with a fish tank above it with a few fucking tiny fish. And the look of disappointment and contempt on her face was just like, this guy's a loser. Like, what is this old guy? And before that, I'd been like the kind of cool uncle who would come down, it'd be all exciting. So I've got particular beef with Jaws 3 for that reason.
Your explanation is brilliant, because I lived in Portsmouth for quite a while and I know that sea life centre very well, because I have a 6-year-old who's obsessed with all things sea creatures. So we've been to that sea life centre quite a few times.
Yeah, it's just awful. But it's probably not awful if you haven't seen Jaws 3.
If you want a really good one, go to Dubai in their shopping mall. That's exactly what you're describing. It sounds like you walk through a tunnel and you're completely surrounded.
But the reason why that isn't the worst sequel for me is because it doesn't matter how bad that or any of the subsequent Jaws films, it doesn't matter how much Michael Caine tries, you can't diminish how good a film Jaws is. Yeah. Like, you can watch Jaws with complete immunity because it's a masterpiece. And I feel the same way about the first Die Hard. I sort of have a bit of a soft spot for Die Hard too, but I think that's partly some kind of Stockholm syndrome of it being on telly every week for the past 25 years. But Die Hard is still brilliant. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how many 5, 6, 7, 8, or however many Bruce Willis churns out. It's just such a perfect action film. But I think the Matrix sequels, as we've touched on, they do diminish the first Matrix. I think they really, really undermine a lot of what I personally thought that film was about and what it was trying to say and how clever and smart it was. So it's hard not to sort of hate the Matrix sequels the most because they ruined a thing that I really loved prior to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Is there a point where you just, in the film, you think this is just shit?
I've seen it once and a bit. So I saw it at the cinema and I tried to watch it again probably a couple of years after it came out on DVD. I thought, all right, I'll give it another chance. Maybe I was in a bad mood. And I think probably 20 minutes into that, I was like, oh yeah, no, it's just all third act. It's this sort of big, bloated, pompous, boring mess. Like, it looks great. Visually, it looks amazing, because I think visually, Speed Racer looks fucking amazing. Yeah. But it's just garbage. It barely makes sense. And you don't care about anyone or anything that's happening. It's kind of a cautionary tale that often I think more is less. When Trinity is willing Neo to get up at the end of that first film, like, it's such an incredible moment. You're so completely invested in the characters and what they stand for and what they believe in. And the complete opposite is the case here. I just didn't care about any of it. And to go from that, the sort of 10 out of 10, completely kind of game changing. These guys have genuinely created new technology that has been built into the storytelling in such a way that's so innovative, to the feeling of deflation when I came out of that third film. I mean, that should be applauded in itself.
Is that like watching your niece like heartbreak from SeaWorld in Portsmouth?
Yes, do you know what? I experienced what she experienced, yes.
Well, just to let you know, if you see the fourth one, I don't think you have you? The new one?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
This will look like a fucking masterpiece. Honestly.
It genuinely will.
I watched this today because I hated it as much as you. I watched it today and I thought, do you know what? This isn't that bad anymore. I genuinely thought, this is actually all right. I prefer this one compared to Reloaded, I think. I like the Siege of Zion. When they're not doing all the bullshit robot crap, like, I don't know who's the one and all that, it's the fourth time they've attacked Zion. When it's just pure robots trying to get into the hub, I thought that's really good. And then it goes on afterwards to the Superman ending, when it's just Smith and Neo looking like computer game characters trying to beat the shit out of each other. It just goes too far.
Yeah.
Watch the new one and you'll love it. That's my advice, Rich.
I'm going to struggle to find the time if that's your review.
Personally, I can't think of anything worse than the fourth Matrix, to be honest.
Wow.
If I hadn't been watching it because we had to review it for this podcast, I would have left. I'd have walked out of the cinema. It was so bad. So it does get worse. I don't know if that's going to save the trilogy for you, watching the fourth one. And you think you'd be like Dave and go back.
Well, I used to have quite strong feelings about Return of the Jedi being so vastly inferior, but in the
Whoa.
passing years and the
Whoa.
prequels, I genuinely think it's a 5-star film now. I absolutely love Return of the Jedi,
It
and
is.
I will forgive those little Ewoks. Would I have felt that way had it not been for the prequels? I maybe, I don't know, but yeah, maybe this is the one that will make me look at Reloaded and Revolutions in 10 years' time and go, well, they weren't that bad.
And maybe that's what they were trying to do all along. Maybe it's like, this is how we make our second and third movies better. We're making the fourth one so incredibly bad.
So what I need to do then, I think, is take my niece to that Dubai SeaWorld.
Yep.
And then that experience will be like, I'll become her Return of the Jedi as an uncle and just bring it full circle.
How old is your niece now?
I mean, she's too old for that. It'd be weird if me and her just went to Dubai on holiday, you know.
I mean, it is a bad film. How would The Matrix be better for you then, Michael? How would you improve it?
The sequels, you mean?
Yeah, let's give them a go.
Yeah, for me, it would be a standalone. The best comparison I can make to the Matrix sequels and the original Matrix is it's like the end of The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. It's left open-ended, and you don't know quite what's going to happen or what could happen. And it's so much better for it that you don't need to go and make sequels. You don't need to revisit it. And I know they've obviously made subsequent The Thing. It doesn't destroy the legacy of the John Carpenter one, which is undoubtedly an absolute masterpiece.
You're 100% right. I'd probably like the original Matrix more if it wasn't for the sequels. So you're 100% just don't make them. And that's how you make it all better.
Do you know what John Carpenter said today? He might be making a sequel to The Thing.
John.
I read it on Total Film. He's got an idea because in his head they both survived at the end, Kurt Russell and Keith David. So
Right.
he's got an idea, but he doesn't want to put it out there what it is.
I mean, I love John Carpenter. I love Kurt Russell, but I hope Netflix or Amazon or any of the big streaming services do not greenlight that.
There's no need for it at all. What is your dream sequel?
So am I allowed, I don't know what the rules are here. Am I allowed a couple of honourable mentions?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you asked this question, my reflex answer was When Harry Met Sally. I don't know if anyone's talked about this or has had it as an option, but I think it's a flawless masterpiece. When Harry Met Sally, I think it's the greatest romantic comedy of all time. It's one of the reasons why I love New York, and New York's my favourite place in the world. But I think it's just everyone involved, apart from maybe Rob Reiner, who it was a run of 5 films for him that are just probably the best run of 5 films of any director if you take them kind of collectively. But it's Billy Crystal at his best. It's Meg Ryan at her best. Nora Ephron at her best. And I think it just defined an entire genre. And the reason why it was my immediate response was that obviously Nora Ephron has passed away not so long ago, but no one else involved in that film has done anything of any merit for quite some time. I think all of their careers have been on a downward trajectory. Not being unkind about all of them. You know, their legacy is untouchable, I think. But the idea of a When Harry Met Sally sequel, what I imagined was sort of sitting down to watch a film and knowing nothing about it coming. And then you just hear on black screen the little twinkling of a piano. And then Harry Connick Jr.'s voice comes in. And then off camera, so it's still black, you hear an clearly older Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan bickering. And on the title, white text on black from director Rob Reiner. They're still bickering a bit more. It gets louder. And writer Nora Ephron.
Nice.
And then you cut to those two as they are now. Clearly still married, clearly still in love. But what a marriage and that relationship is. And then knowing that you're going to spend 2 hours in their company, dissecting their life and going, hey, it can work out. And yeah, it is hard work and marriages are difficult. But when you love someone and they're your friend and you put the work in, this is how funny and charming and lovely it can be. That's a film I would queue up to watch in a heartbeat.
Lovely.
And I think everyone involved probably needs it.
Yeah.
We've had someone pick When Harry Met Sally. Very different to your idea, and they called it When Sally Left Harry. And it's about...
no, guys, no. Why would you?
It's the best pitch we had last season. We really enjoyed it. And it's like set now. It sounded really good. Josh Weller dropped it. Basically, I bought it just after the name. I thought that was genius. But you would go in the opposite direction, which is also lovely.
if that film happened, I'd go full John Wick. Like, you might as well have killed my dog. If that's what someone chooses to do with that story and those characters, that's just wrong, man. That's just wrong.
I think at the end they end up getting back together, though, right? I think
I think they did.
In Josh's pitch, they end up they go through this full circle and end up realising they're still in love with each other at the end. So I think you'd probably still get your ending.
Okay, well, tell Josh maybe I'll spare his family, but he's still going down.
I love that you had two different ideas, though. So this makes your pick quite interesting as well.
A very quick second honourable mention. Which is The Colour of Money. I think by most people considered to be a kind of lesser Scorsese. Paul Newman is playing an older version of the character that he played in The Hustler, and Tom Cruise is this kind of like young upstart who is hustling on the sort of pool halls in, I think it's sort of like Chicago area. I genuinely think it's a brilliant film, but it's a film that was probably made about 10 years too late. So by the mid-80s, I think it's 86, it felt very much like the sort of thing that William Friedkin or, Altman or someone like those guys would have made in 1976. This kind of grubby, gritty character study about redemption. But it's most famously known because obviously Paul Newman won the Academy Award for it when he should have won the Academy Award 4 or 5 times prior to that, be it Butch Cassidy, be it Hard. There's a number of films where he probably should have won. Now, My Colour of Money sequel basically transplants Tom Cruise into the Paul Newman role, and Cruise wins his Academy Award for this when he should have won it for Magnolia, when he should have won it for Jerry Maguire, perhaps even Born on the 4th of July,
And Mission Impossible 7 or 5, whatever we're on now.
And I'm a big fan of Tom Cruise. I think he's genuinely a brilliant, brilliant film star. And I know he gets a lot of stick because
he's mental.
Off camera.
Yeah.
He makes some questionable life choices. But you won't see a more committed film star than Tom Cruise. And I don't just mean kind of physically and stunt. He gives everything to every single role. But this feels like a Martin Scorsese directed Colour of Money sequel where an aging Tom Cruise, and I think Tom Cruise would have to play his age in this. Let the wrinkles, let the sag set in, let people kind of see that time's taken its toll, and then someone else that comes in and is a sort of young upstart. I can't imagine the pool hustling scene is particularly big anymore. So you'd have to sort of think of the mechanics of like what it is that they did.
I always thought The Colour of Money was a sequel to The Hustler.
Yeah, I always put it down to
weird that it's not.
Well, it technically
it
is.
It is.
It's the same character.
Oh, right, okay.
He is Fast Eddie Felton.
Right, okay. I like that idea. I like the idea of seeing Tom Cruise play his age, if nothing else. It's about time he did that. And yeah, you're right. That could be his Oscar. If he does do that, it would be such a departure for him that could be his Oscar.
Well, when Tom Cruise acts, he can act. And it's always nice to see him do it. So yeah, I'd like to see that. Did you say Scorsese to stay the director or just producing? Who would you?
I'd like to see Scorsese. Yeah, I'd like to see him take the reins again.
Who would you like to see be the young apprentice?
I think it'd have to be someone unknown. I think one of the issues, one of the problems that The Colour of Money had is that when they shot that film, Tom Cruise wasn't Tom Cruise. I think he had just done what's the Coppola gang film, The Outsiders?
Outsiders, yeah.
Outsiders. But he was filming Top Gun at the same time or straight after. But then Top Gun came out before The Colour of Money and sort of blew him up, basically. So that when The Colour of Money came along, it's like, well, what the fuck is this? But I think you'd want to cast someone who wasn't known, who perhaps Star was on the ascendancy. Who that is, I don't know. But I don't think you wouldn't want to put a name in there.
No. Lovely. I'd watch that. And what's your final choice?
So my actual dream sequel, and someone else has had this before. I checked with you guys beforehand, and I didn't want to tread on anyone's toes and sort of, talk about the same thing. But there's a very specific reason for this. Is Leon, the Luc Besson action film with Jean Reno and Natalie Portman. And the reason I've picked this, and I had gone back this weekend. So this weekend just gone was the big storms. I mean, obviously nip this out if it's going to timestamp the episode, depending on when it goes out. But basically, I was due to go back to the Isle of Wight and see my family at the weekend. And somewhere in the loft at my mum's house, from my first semester at film school, is a beat sheet mapping out the story and plot points and a few sample scenes for Leon 2 that I wrote in my first year of film school. Now, sadly, because of the storm, I couldn't get back to the Isle of Wight. The trains and the ferries got cancelled, so I didn't get a chance to rummage around for it. It's been in there since 2002. So, it's been sat in a box in the loft for 20 years. And I was quite excited to dig it out and have some fun sort of going through. So I'm sort of running this from 20-year-old memory. But basically, my pitch was that I had taken the basic structure of The Godfather Part 2 in that you would see and spend time with an older Natalie Portman. And what had happened is over the ensuing years, she had risen up and trained herself basically to become an assassin with the ultimate end game of getting vengeance for the people responsible. And I don't just mean the people responsible as in Gary Oldman, who's obviously killed at the end of the film, but the guy who plays his friend who owns like the deli. Basically, he's the one that gives him up. He's the one that betrays him in the film. And she knows that. She knows that they're responsible. But he's kind of plugged into a much bigger and wider kind of New York mobster underground infrastructure. So her half of the film is sort of her training, seeing how good she is, and then slowly taking those guys down. But then the flip side of that, a bit like the De Niro side, where you meet the young Vito Corleone who becomes the Godfather of Marlon Brando, is that you meet a young Jean Reno who at the time is in the French Resistance because he's a sort of like French kind of Algerian immigrant who he has no education. He's come from a sort of very poor background. He can't read, he can't write. His basically only thing is to train to, become a killer, to become a military guy. But while he's there, he falls in love with the wife of a senior officer who then they get in an affair with, and he ends up killing this guy. I hadn't worked out. It was probably going to be in some sort of clumsy, like self-defense / he was a bad guy. He was mistreating her and Leon came to her defense. But he has to go on the run and skips out of the French Resistance and goes on the run to America. And then we track him working his way up and sort of, he's on the streets. He's basically homeless. He's got no contacts. He doesn't speak the language. He can't read or write. And it's his kind of story. And the film eventually ends with the opening shot of the original Leon, which is this sort of lovely helicopter shot over the water into sort of through New York City. But it's the first time that Leon walks up to the door of the deli and meets the guy who then sort of becomes his kind of handler and the guy who gives him the contracts. Just before that, you've seen Natalie Portman essentially wipe them all out, including him. So there's this nice kind of like full circle where you see the beginning and the end of each of their narratives.
Oh, that's
love
very
it.
Clever. I think if there'd been a competition, then I think you might have just won with the idea there. I love that. I'd pay very good money to watch that movie. I'm really sorry, Tim from the Sequelizers, who also picked Leon, but yeah, sorry, this wins.
I like them both. I'm going to stay absolutely neutral. Would you keep Luc Besson as a director, or is there a director you would think would be great?
Ooh, I mean, if anyone's hiring Luc Besson now, I might as well say, just hire Roman Polanski. It's I think he should not be hired for moral reasons, but also I just don't think he's a particularly effective director anymore. So I think you'd want to bring someone new on board.
Catherine Bigelow, maybe? Only because I've just watched Point Break.
I'd love to see a Leon sequel directed by Catherine Bigelow. Yeah, 100%.
How would you go bigger as a bad guy? So Sal's a bad guy, but would you have someone else as well? And how do you go bigger than Gary Oldman?
Well, you can't go bigger than Gary Oldman in that film. I'd say it's literally impossible. So I think you'd probably have to steer away from that completely, because I think others would pale in comparison. I don't know. I think you'd probably have to introduce someone who was higher up the food chain than Sal, because he seems sort of fairly low rent. And I think she sort of ends up uncovering a kingpin style New York person. And then you cast someone who is going to be completely different, but is also going to kind of dominate that side of the film in the same way. I think if you tried to get anyone to go toe to toe with Gary Oldman in that film, you'd be a maniac.
Yeah, that would be insane to watch. Even someone try. Oh, he's so good in that movie.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I know his character is on drugs, but at some points I'm thinking this guy is definitely on coke as well to go this big. It's
yeah.
I love it. Thank you very much, Michael.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. This is. I was thinking about it. This is my first actual podcast appearance. I've been on podcasts as a producer and had to speak, but this is the first time I've come on as an actual guest. So thanks for popping my cherry, guys.
Wow.
You're welcome. I knew it because I remember you telling the story on Quickly Kevin, how you went to Blockbuster, your last ever Blockbuster or something, and thought, he likes films.
Yes, yeah. I went on a pilgrimage to. I mean, it was one of the best 2 days of my life. I'm not going to lie. It's a 3-day detour to Bend, Oregon, from LA because I heard there was one Blockbuster in the world left. I was like, great, yep, that's me for the next 3 days.
Brilliant. So, what's the last Blockbuster like? Is it just like a normal Blockbuster, or have they made it kind of?
I think they have deliberately kept it similar to what it was like as an experience in the kind of 90s and noughties. So, you know, the scene where the critic samples the Ratatouille in Ratatouille?
Yeah.
When I walked in, there was this sort of transportation back to being 16, 17 years old on the Isle of Wight, because I'm fairly certain if the carpet wasn't identical, all of the kind of iconography, all of like the colour palette, everything else just hadn't changed. And the joy that I experienced just walking around that place, it was unparalleled. It was like a sort of grown-up Disneyland.
Could you rent something?
I didn't rent anything because I didn't have a membership, and I wasn't there for long enough to get one. But they did. Obviously, they know a lot of tourists come along, so you can buy a sort of like fake membership there where they put your name and sort of print out the membership. One of the things that made me laugh while I was there was they had like for sale bins, you know, where they're selling off like the ex-rental and the dead stock.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff they were selling was old American VHSs. Who in 2000 and what would have been 19 or 18? Who is still buying VHSs? There's a reason why you guys have gone out of business. Like, this is absolutely insane that you're giving up floor space to the idea that someone would buy a 50-cent copy of Tin Cup. but I bought it as a souvenir.
As you say,
amazing.
There's some hipster in Hoxton somewhere who's going, yeah, I only watch VHSs, man, because they're like, you know, they've got that cool edge to them, you know, the extra grittiness. I don't stream. I just watch VHSs.
I mean, if that happens, I'm all for the vinyl revolution. But if people start watching stuff on VHS, then game's
That'd be a
gone.
bizarre. Yeah, I don't get that. 4K all the way now.
People are back buying cassette tapes. You know, it's going to happen.
But why?
I know. And those were Michael Marden's Unequal Sequels. What a lovely man.
The man loves films, doesn't he?
He does.
Always knowledgeable. Film school and all that.
Absolutely. And I love that he went to the last ever Blockbuster in America. That's a cracker. I'd love to do that one day.
That's commitment, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's some serious commitment. Yeah. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
I also loved that he came on a podcast about sequels where he got to he would be able to pick about any sequel he wanted. And he thought other people would have picked Godfather 2 or Empire Strikes Back. So he picked Young Guns 2. And do you know what? Thanks for that, because I don't think anyone else is ever going to pick that.
No. It's a good movie. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it.
When he found out that no one's picked those other two yet.
We could have been talking about Godfather Part 2. Could have been talking about Empire Strikes Back. But no. Young Guns 2. Love
We're
it.
going to talk about that Bon Jovi-based cowboy film.
Again. I like that. I like the soundtrack.
It's a great soundtrack.
It's a fun movie. It is a fun movie, and I get why he picked it. I mean,
I get why, because of the memories and how he,
yeah.
you know, what he holds and how he holds it. But Billy the Kid is not a nice guy, and I didn't warm to him at all. No. And I hadn't seen Young Guns 1.
Yeah,
and I still haven't seen Young Guns 1.
It's worth watching, mate. It's worth watching. You should go and watch it.
Yeah.
You know, not that you get a chance, because we're just watching sequels all the time these days. But you know,
that is my life now. And then we got to talk about Matrix Revolutions.
I mean, completely agree. Like it's not good.
Still hold up. It's not the worst. The seconds. Actually, I don't know any more about the Matrixes. They're just
everything after 1 is not good. That's all you need to know, really. The Matrix is a brilliant standalone film, and then 5 good scenes. After that, that's it.
Yeah.
End of story.
Then the Dream sequel, we got to talk about Leon again, and when Harry met Casella, he mentioned again.
Yeah. So, on a par with Josh Weller there, both having a very kind of strong ideas for When Harry Met Sally,
but different ideas.
Yeah, different ideas. I like that. But a very similar pick for Leon, I think.
Yes, it's different from the previous one we've had.
Yeah.
Because it was like a Godfather 2 flavoured, that we saw the Jean Reno character and how he came to be Leon.
Which was a little bit different from Tim from Sequelizers, who also picked Leon, didn't we?
Which had no John Reno, and it was all Natalie Portman.
All Natalie Portman.
But what's so good about Michael is that he wrote this in like film school, this idea. So it's somewhere in his mum and dad's loft.
Yeah, there is a script.
There is a script.
And it's percolated for a long time. You can tell. He's thought about that for a long time, hasn't he?
He was. He was just great to have on the podcast. Gave us lots of great advice as well, so thank you for that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he really did. And
great.
if you've come over from one of his other podcasts to come and listen to him on this podcast, thank you for doing that. We really hope you stick with us, because this is quite a good podcast too. If you like movies, if you like funny people, then this is the place to be. But not saying we're funny people, we're funny looking, no. But we have funny people and very knowledgeable people as guests on these episodes. So if you do like what you hear, if you have joined us for the first time, then don't forget to go and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If it's Google, if it's Apple, if it's Spotify, then hit that little subscribe button and you'll get to hear us every week. Sometimes twice a week, because we have an extra episode on a Friday, which is a shorter episode, no guest, sometimes a guest. We're adding a few extra guests into the mix. And then we talk about other sequel news that we've got coming up, good movies, anniversaries, sometimes do a ranking. Yeah, they're fun episodes. So make sure you listen to those. If you've just tuned in for this one, we've got 2 other series worth to go and listen to. So make sure you go back and listen to Series 1, Series 2. We've got some brilliant guests on there. Like we've mentioned, guys from the Sequelizers. We've got guys from the Cine Mile. Brilliant movie podcasts. We've also got comedians like Sean Walsh and Nick Helm and Josh Weller. With brilliant guests for you to go back to listen to. So please do that. And when you're there, if you fancy writing us a little review, if you get your podcast from a place that allows that, we'd love that. Please give us a little cheeky review. Just let us know if you enjoyed it. That would be lovely. Give us a 5 stars or a heart or a thumbs up or any of those little icons that you get. That would be really great as well. We'd really appreciate it. And also, if you want to get in touch, we're on social media. So we're at Unequal Sequel on Twitter and on Instagram. And you can even send us an email, unequalsequel@hotmail.com. Say hello. We love that.
We do love it. I just want to say thank you for listening. We do appreciate everyone that is listening. You're all brilliant. We love you very much. Go listen to Michael's podcast, Quickly Kevin. It is fantastic, especially if you like 90s football and Championship Manager and that kind of thing.
It's so good.
It's mine and Rich's era, so it's so good. Yes. Listen to Parent in Hell. Everyone does anyway, because it's fucking brilliant as well. It's hilarious. But carry on listening to us. We will be back next week. So it is a bye from me.
Oh, that was a long one.
Yep. And a bye from him.
Bye.
Have a lovely week. We'll see you next time. Bye.